Begin the current Daf, Mesechta Kidushin Daf Gimel. Begin 4 lines down at the top of the Yomid. The Gemara is in the middle of a conversation from the previous Daf, which we opened up the Mesechta, the Parak, the Mishnah, discussing Ha'isha Niknes Peshalish Drachim. And we said, why is it talking about the Isha, the woman, not the man? Why does it say Niknes, acquired, and not regarding Mekadesh? Why does it say Beshalish, Lashon Zachar, and not Lashon Nekeva, and not Lashon Zachar? And then we were in the middle of the conversation. Why does it say drachim and not devarim? Why does it say that of a path? And therefore, because it says a path, it has to tell me a different terminology of feminine. Because it's what type of derech are we talking about? What type of lashon that talking about who mi darke lachza achar mi? So it has to say that of drachim. So the Gemara is in the middle of us saying that, discussing this when would we say the terminology of derech in contrast to some other terminology like that of davar or not. Turn to today's daf. Some discussed in today's daf are the Gemara is going to discuss the kinyan of chuppah. We know chuppah is that of nisuin. The question is going to be how would that work at all regarding kedushin, the halacha of kin chalipin regarding its acquisition, and chalitza regarding that of the avama, that the way she goes ahead and she acquires herself is with chalitza. The question, however, is would the same thing be regarding a married woman could use chalitza too? And the Gemara is going to discuss regarding kal v'chomer. Hav zaka bebitoy. The Gemara discusses a few elements of a father's rights in his daughter in regards to different things, and nayam harasa regarding the betrothed girl, that she actually is somewhere in between avia bailam afin nederau. So that's really something that the father already loses the moment she gets engaged. Is that he doesn't have all the rights in her anymore. In regards to Hafaras and Dharma, he has to share that with her chassan. So begin the current Daf Gimel. 4 lines down at the top of the Amid, we had mentioned, as we said, that Ha'isha Niknes B'Shalit Jirachim. We said that it said in the Lashon Nekeva, and because we're discussing Jirachim, which could be either one, could be male or female, and since we're talking about something that is regarding that of engaging a woman, so it says it in the feminine instead of devarim, which you could use a lashon zachar, and the Gemara assumes that you would always use lashon zachar because we always speak in the masculine. So why did we use the word drachim and not devarim? So the Gemara says either because bia ikri derech, one of the 3 ways of kinyanim is with bia. Bia, the Gemara brought psukim that says it's a path, and therefore we use the terminology derech because one of the 3 kinyanim is that of bia. And again, then for when we use the word drachim, then you already have to translate what gender it's going to be in, and therefore we say b'shalish, which is in the feminine. The second interpretation was no darchesh al ish l'chazra al isha. The reason why we use the word drachim is because we want to tell you sedu aderech. It's namal. There's a way. There's a path. This is how things usually are. Which is the way of a man is to go after a woman. And it's not the way of a woman to go after a man. And therefore we use the terminology of drachim. And similarly, the Gemara had said that's why we have b'shiva drachim b'itkim esazav, to tell you that it's normal. It's the way that if someone eats too much or drinks too much, it's going to bring tziva. And also esrig shaval ilim b'shleisha drachim. We said, yeah, that's the last thing we said, that it's the way of an esrig to be like a yerek, that my yerek darke legalo kamayim, because it's how it grows. Therefore, b'shas legetasi is a. So we said that's the thing for esrig. So it's on that theme that the Gemara continues to ask of why we use a terminology of derech. Anytime you use the word derech, it means to say that there's a namalkite, there's a way things usually are. So 4 lines down at the top of the Yom Daf Gimel, the Gemara says, so what do you do? How do you explain B'Hadatnan? It's a Mishnah in Bikurim that talks about either it's pronounced Koi or Kvi, whatever it is, but it's a creature that it's not clear if it's a suffix, if it's a chaya, a wild animal, or behemoth. Halacha, the Chacham didn't know how to qualify it as a wild animal or as a domestic animal. So what's the difference? So there's a few halachic differences, and therefore, yesh b'drachim, since we weren't sure about the status of this kai, that we have to go stringently in any one of the ways. So in certain paths, it's shabbat l'chaya. It's similar and stringently to a wild animal, and therefore you require the blood to be covered. A chaya and a oif, when you slaughter the animal, the blood has to be covered. A behemoth doesn't have to be. So in some ways, it's similar to a wild animal. In some ways, it's similar to a domestic animal, which it's like a cow. Its fats are forbidden. In contrast, a chaya, actually, the fats are permitted. So in that way, we'll have to treat it like a behemoth. In certain paths, it has trouble chaya behemoth, similar to a chaya and a behemoth, meaning that you have to slaughter it, which both those need slaughtering. And the in certain paths, in the shava, that is not similar, not to a wild animal and not to a domestic animal, meaning you're not allowed to mate this koi with a chaya or a behema. Taisa discusses that regarding how do we understand what the koi is, but be that as it may, you're not sure if it's a chaya or behema, so you wouldn't be able to mate it with either one because it would be a problem about climb. So there, it's going to be not like either one of them because you can't mate it with either one. Okay, but the one thing the Gemara wants out of this Mishnah is that nisnei dvarim. Why are we saying all these words are talking about drachim? There are paths, but you told me anytime you'll say the word drachim is because it wants to tell me, oh, darkoi, that this is the norm, this is the path, and therefore we say that terminology. Well, how does that apply over here? What derech is there over here regarding the kite? Nisnei dvarim, I should say the word dvarim. So, moreover, says the Gemara, what are you doing in the Mishnah Masechet is Gittin? The Mishnah says, Zu achas min hadrachim. This is one of the drachim, and use the terminology of paths again. That when you divorce a woman with a get, is similar to when you emancipate a slave with a document. Meaning that if someone brings a get or shtar shiur from Medina Siyam from overseas, halacha is that the shliach, the agent, has to say, "B'fanei nechta, in front of me was written, in front of me was signed." In the first pack Masechet is Gittin. The question here is also nisnei dvarim. You should also say things. Why drachim? Meaning you had told me al shtikul Torah, and you were explaining to me that the reason why we use drachim in our Mishnah is because it's telling me that this is the derech. But what do these Mishnayos have the word derech? It doesn't apply to the answer you were giving. So Re'ela rather says the Gemara a different answer. So the Gemara falls off what it said in the previous daf, that the reason why we say ish niknis b'shalish drachim is because madarker shalish lachazer, it's telling me a derech, because it's not necessarily always the answer of why we use the word derech. Rather, kol heicha deka plukta, anywhere where there is a differentiation, meaning there is different paths, different roads to take. In this way, it's similar to this. In this way, it's not similar. In other words, like in our Mishnah, when we spoke about b'shalish drachim, because we're coming to exclude chuppah, as we're going to shortly explain, that is not kaina for Kidushin. Or let's say the Mishnah we brought on the previous daf regarding Zav. Oh, in these 7 ways, it's going to be considered as an einis for Ziva, but not any other einis. Or let's say regarding Gittin. Regarding these two this halacha, the Gittin nosh meshachur avadim are the same. But not if, let's say, someone says, give this get to my wife, or give this shtar shiur to my eved, the halacha is going to be different. Because actually by the get, he'll be able to back out, but he won't be able to back out by shiur, because for divorce, it's a chayv, a liability. For emancipation as a slave, zachan la'adam shleh b'vanav. The shliach already acquired it for the eved. So whenever there's differentiation, then tani drachim. Then we said paths, because there's paths over here. And it could, in one way it's like this, in one way it's not. Wherever there is no differentiation, so tani dvarim, just when it's just counting, it's saying these things. But if there's other exceptions, then we said drachim. And that answers all the Mishnayos that we brought that use the terminology of drachim. It says the Gemara, Dekanami, a precise reading also indicates that when there's no plukta, when there's no differentiation, it says the word davar. What's the raya? Because the Tani Seifa, we had quoted that Mishnah Bikurim on the top of the summit from the previous daf regarding the esrig being shavala ilan begimel drachim. So in the Seifa over there, the Tani Seifa, the Mishnah says, Rabbi Lazar, he says, esrig shavala ilan l'chal davar. Esrig is similar to a tree in everything. Wait a second, the Tanakam used the word derech. Why is he using the word davar? Oh, because the Tanakam was saying regarding differentiations. Oh, for this is like a tree, for this is like a yerek. When we said when there's differentiation, then you use the word derech. But the Rebbe Lazar is saying they're all the same. L'chal davar. So he's going to use the word davar and not derech. That itself and that Mishnah itself will prove that that's the reason for the terminology. Shema Minah. Now we understand why in our Mishnah and in all those other sources we use the word drachim, because there is differentiation, and therefore we use the word derech. Now the Gemara asks on the Mishnah, we had mentioned ha'isha niknes b'shalish drachim, and we said v'koines atzma b'shtei drachim. So we used a number. What was the purpose of the number, which actually takes on the previous stuff discussed? Why by later Mishnah it doesn't use numbers, and he says either because of the Sefer of our Mishnah wouldn't be applicable, and or some other reasons. But in our Mishnah we use a number. When you use a number, so the Gemara says binyan dereisha, when it says the woman is acquired in 3 drachim, What's that coming to exclude? Saying these three, it sounds like you're excluding something else. And minyanda de seifa, when you said that she's kind to herself in two ways, what's that coming to exclude? When you're saying a number, you obviously mean to say these and not something else. So the Gemara explains, minyanda de reisha, when we said in the reisha that she acquires herself in three, that you could acquire a woman in three ways, was l'mu'ute chuppah, meaning if her father gave her over to the chuppah for the purposes of being Kidushin, that would not make Kidushin. Chuppah works, Nisuin, but it would not create a Kidushin. That's what we're saying. This three is to exclude that of Chuppah. The Gemara says, but according to Rav Huna, which the Gemara brings later on, Daf Yomi and Aleph, Dama that he says, Chuppah koine mikal b'choyim. He says, what are you talking about? For sure, from a kabbalah, Chuppah is going to be able to acquire the woman for the purpose of a Kidushin. So then the question is, what is it excluding? It's obviously not excluding Chuppah, because he holds Chuppah is kaina from a kabbalah. So according to Rav Huna, what would the number three come to exclude? So the Gemara, so it's coming to exclude something else, lamute chalipin, which is the kinyan, the acquisition of a sudr, of a kerchief, which is when you give the something, the Rav gives you his pen, gives you his hat, and you give over something to, and that way the acquisition happens. The question is, whose kerchief is it? But the point is, by giving that over, that creates the kinyan. So that's what we're coming to exclude, because you would have thought to say, since we learn out that it says the word kicha, taking by kicha by getting engaged, and it says kicha, the word as we said on the previous daf, kach, by the field of Ephron. So masa the mekani bechalipin, just like a field could be acquired with chalipin. How do we know that? Rashi brings a pasuk in Rus. It says v'yishlev na'aloi, that he took off his shoe. There was actually a field. He was saying, who's going to redeem this field? With the field came Rus. But who's going to redeem these fields of bayas, of the, meaning the doing it of the what's his name again? The husband of Nami, whatever. But the point is that who's going to redeem it? That was talking about a field. So wait, we see that a field can be acquired with chalipin. I would think, okay, a woman is also, because you compare the two kinyanim of sada and of a woman. So that's what the Gemara is saying, that's what the Mishnah is coming to exclude, to say that no, chalipin is not going to work. So the Gemara says, why? Taka, you have kicha mistei Ephron. A field you see in Megillus Rus could be acquired with giving over the shoe, giving over something as a chalipin. So why wouldn't you say the same thing would apply by a woman? So the Gemara says, no, because chalipin is chalipin is possible to be done with something worth less than the pruta. As the Gemara tells him about Mitzvah Zayin and Aleph, you could be kind with a kli even though it's not worth a pruta. Isha b'pachis mishava pruta, and a woman for something less than a pruta, as we continue to Medbeis, loy mikanya nafsha. So as Machlekes Rashi tells exactly what does this mean, but Rashi says that it's a disgrace for her. She would not accept such a kedushin, and therefore they nullified the halacha of chalipin to work for kedushin, even by a vessel that has a shavat pruta, if you're giving it in the terminology of chalipin, until you give it to her in the medium of a terminology of an acquisition, kinyan or kicha or kedushin, some other type of medium, but not that of chalipin, because that would be degrading for the woman, and therefore she would not accept that as it wouldn't qualify as a kedushin. So that's what the Reisha is coming to exclude again, either chuppah or chalipin. Says Gemara, minyanda de seifa l'motei mai. This that we said that she's kind of herself in two ways. What's the number two coming to exclude? Says the Gemara, l'motei chalitza is coming to exclude that of chalitza. Which is what? Saga that when you would have thought to say taste of mekabel miyavama, you should learn out from mekabel from yavama. Why? Ma yavama, if we find by yavama, shein yoitze beget. Or yavama, if a woman is widowed and her husband died without any children, the halacha is, as the Gemara learns out later on this parak, that it says v'chasav la. When it comes to when you're divorcing a woman, the Torah tells you write for her a sefer creases, which is the woman you're divorcing. Law tells you, and not for the yavama. So we learn that from there that a yavama cannot be sent away with get. She can only be sent away with chalitza. So if Yavama, that get doesn't work, and still Yetze B'chalitza, you see Chalitza is still strong enough to send her away, so Zushi Yetze B'get. So regarding this woman who's being divorced, which she could be released with a get, in the din Yetze B'chalitza, isn't it a couple of that for sure Chalitza should work? And you should be able to take off the shoe and spit and do the whole parasha of Chalitza by a woman that you're trying to divorce. That's what coming to tell you that no, she's cutting herself in two ways, only a get or that of Misa, but not Chalitza. Says, why? Why don't you say that it's a Kabul Chaimer from Yavama? Says Gemara Amakra. Pasuk says in Devarim, Sefer Krisis. V'chasav law, a Sefer Krisis, he writes for a Sefer Krisis, which teaches you Sefer Karsa, only a scroll could sever the ties. But Chalitza cannot sever the ties. Okay, so that was the reason why we said Ha'isha Niknes B'shalish Drachim. So we finished that part of the Mishnah, those words. Now we move on to the next word of the Mishnah. We got Shtat, one word by word. The Kesef. What was the first kinyan? Was with money. Says the Gemara, Minalan. From where do we know that a woman could be acquired with money? Which Rashi points out, here is really the primary discussion. On the previous Daf, Bezim and Aleph, that we brought this was only secondary because we wanted to answer why we said her Isha Niknes. We wanted to say the terminology of kinyan. So now we're saying that, and then we said, okay, kinyan was because of, we wanted to talk about Kesef, and Kesef is kinyan. That's like we find the pasuk about Avraham Avinu. But here is really the main conversation. How do we know that a woman could be acquired with money? Pursue another question, once we're asking, is Hadat Nan. This is what we learn in the Mishnah Masechta Ksubis. It says, Zakai Bebitoy, a father has rights in his daughter B'Kidushaha. He gets her Kidushin. And that's B'Kesef, meaning to say that if she gets engaged with money, the money is his. B'Shtar, he could receive the shtar to get her engaged. And Ubabiyah, if the father wants to, he could give her over to a man for biyah, against her will, for the purpose of a Kidushin, when she's still a naira, when she's still a young girl. So the question is, minalan, from where do we know these two things? Number one, the mekanya b'kesef, in general. The halacha of our Mishnah, how do we know that she can be acquired with money? And also, number two, how do we know b'kesef davuhu, that the father has the rights to it, like as the Mishnah teaches over there in Masechet Ksubas. So how do we know the halacha of our Mishnah and Mishnah Masechet Ksubas? Some of Yehudi says, we learned both of them, Amarav, from the Amakra. Pasuk says in Shemais, and this is by the Amma Havriya, the Jewish maidservant, which is when the father, he has rights, he could sell his daughter as a slave to another master. When she leaves the master, the domain of her master, because she brings simoni nairis, the moment a girl develops a puberty, so she is released from the master. So the pasuk says over there, "V'yatzachinam in kasef." She goes out for free without any money. Now the truth is, it could have written, "V'yatzachinam." She goes out for free. You don't have to say without money. Obviously, for free is without money. And the reason why we're saying that is sometimes you pay your way out. When you sell a slave, you could pay and you could go based on the amount of years left, and you could pay your way out. When she reaches puberty, then you don't have to. She goes out free without any money. So why does it say in kasef? Coming to make the following drasha. Ein kasef la'adin zeh. Yeah, there's no money for this master when she leaves from him. Avayesh kasef la'adin acher. But there is money to another master when she leaves him. But maniu, who's this other master that when she leaves him, there is money? That's the Av, that's the father. So you see from that extra words, Ein Kasav is teaching you that when the girl leaves her father because she gets engaged to a man, there is money, and her father is going to get the money. Says, wait a second, where do you see that? Maybe say, when we say when she leaves her father, there's going to be money, but it's going to her the money. Because it doesn't say in the pasuk, Ein Loi Kasav. It doesn't say when she leaves her master, when she's a slave woman. It doesn't say that to him there's no money, to infer from there that there's no money for this master, but that there is there's money for another master, which is her father. No, maybe make the diuk, say, yeah, there's no money by this leaving of this master, but there is money by another leaving, but it doesn't say who the money is. Maybe the money goes to her when she gets engaged to a man. So the Gemara says, Hachi hashta? Can you compare? Can you say such a thing? Aviyah makabel kedusha. The father is the one who receives the kedushin. How do we know that? The Chassidus says a pasuk in Devarim. It says, "Biti nesati l'isha." When the father is saying this whole thing regarding the claims of the husband, he says, "And my daughter I have given to this man." So we see that the father has the rights to give over his daughter. So he's receiving the kedushin. He has the authority to execute who she's going to get married to. V'i shakal kaspa, and she's going to take the money. You think it's for nothing that the Torah gives him a right to receive the kedushin? Meaning Rashi makes sound like stuff sein Geld. You know what I'm saying? He has to choose who the chusn is because he gets the money. That's show me the money, and that's where it is. So if that's the case, so it says the Gemara, no. Therefore, you can't say that. Oh, you want to say maybe the girl gets the money? No, because if the Torah is giving him the rights to tell us who she gets engaged to, then most definitely he's going to get the monetary rights to that also. So that's the source for the king of Kesef going to the father. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Maybe say, when do we say this, that the father has the rights to receive the Kidushin? Is a katana de lesa yad lekabel Kidushin. Here it gets a little gritty over here, a little technical over here. Maybe that was only for a young girl who she doesn't have any of her own hand to receive a Kidushin. Because when a girl is young, let's say 11-year-old, she doesn't have any intelligence. Now, Rashi's bothered by the Gemara's question. He says, this pasuk of Asbiti Nisati Lishazeh, when was this pasuk said? This is by the Moitzi Shemra. Her husband says, comes to the roof the next morning, the chasna says, Nish gesehen, kein besilim, vadem idol. Right? So he's spreading words. So the father gets up and he says, "It's beating this out. I gave this guy, and he's spreading rumors about my thing." And that's the Moitzi Shemra. That pasuk is about a na'ara, a girl in puberty between 12 and 12 and a half, as the pasuk says in the Devarim Chabez, "V'nosnei la'avi hanaira." He has to pay up for the 100 slime because he spread rumors about his new wife to the father of the naira. So it's a naira. How could you tell me that? When does the father get the rights and his daughter is only when she's a katana? But the Gemara is going to ask right now, maybe a naira that she has her own intelligence. Maybe she would go and get it herself. But the pasuk itself that we're saying is beaten is that he has the rights is by a naira. That's Rashi's question on the Gemara. Says Rashi, yeah, but we're talking about that he got her engaged when she was a minor. They only got consummated the relationship when she was a naira. So now she's a naira. The guy's gonna have to pay up laveha naira. But it was already 2 years ago already that we made the shidduch already that she got engaged when she was a katana. So you wouldn't bring a raya necessarily as bidnisat leshazeh would be that he even has the rights when she's a naira. It's just that now they had nisuah now when she's a naira. So that's how Rashi just addresses that question. But that's what the Gemara is entertaining to say. He says, wait a second. Maybe when the father has the rights and therefore he gets the money is when she's a young girl. She's 11. Which she doesn't have any of her own yad and own intelligence to receive a kedushin. But when she's already 12, when she already brought 2 pubic hairs and there in halacha, she's like an adult for all halachas. When she gets her bas mitzvah, for all punishments, for monetary things, that her sale is a sale and her buying is a buying. So maybe then I'm going to ask you the question, taktish ihi nafsha. Well, then maybe actually she should be allowed to make herself engaged. That's question number 1. And obviously a second result of that is v'tishkol kaspa. Maybe she should take the money. You're telling me that the father is makabel or kesef kedushin. How do you know it's even by a naira? Maybe that's only going to be by a katana. But maybe in naira, where she has her own intelligence and she has her own yad, maybe the girl herself should get the kesef kedushin. So Makra, the pasuk is about midbar. Binureha beisaviha, in her youth, in her father's household. What is the pasuk coming to tell us? A drasha that as long as she's in her neurim, when she's in her pubic stage, she is of her father. To tell you, kol shvach neurim, all the benefit that she has as a nara that comes to her is going to be lavia, is going to go to the father. So you already know that whatever profit she has as a naira, let's say she gets engaged, is going to go to the father. So the Gemara says, wait a second. If that's the case, says, "Menayin shemaisa bas la'av." Where do we know that when the daughter, makes earnings, she goes to camp, she gets all these tips, being a great JC, she comes home, father says, "Nimm mir aus der Geld, right? Leg auf den Tisch, now go back, now go play, right?" How do we know that her earnings go to the father? Shemai says the pasuk in Shemais says "V'chiyimker ish es bitay la'ama." Says that if a man is going to sell his daughter as a maidservant, now la'ama is superfluous, says Rashi. If he's going to sell his daughter, what's la'ama? So it's coming to say a drasha that a daughter is like an amma, a daughter is like a maidservant, and it's coming to teach us regarding, obviously, Rashi explains for a daughter that's a naira, because if it's a young girl, like 11-year-old, we don't need a pasuk to teach you that with la'ama, because if you're allowed to sell her as a maidservant, obviously her earnings go to you. But when we're comparing the bita la'ama, is telling me even the daughter that you cannot sell. Which daughter can you not sell? When a girl is 12, when she's a naira, you can't sell her anymore as a amma. But the word la'ama is is superfluous to compare the bitay to an amma. Now, as Rashi is addressing that, saying which bitay must be the bitay that's a naira, because the bitay that's a katana, I don't need you to compare it to amma. She actually could be sold as an amma, so I don't need to tell you her earnings go to the father. So, but that's what the Gemara Rav says, that when it says the extra word la'ama is to teach you ma amma ma'asidel rabba, just like a maidservant, her earnings obviously go to her master. Abbas nami ma'asidel avia. Also, the daughter, her earnings also go to the father. And like Rashi already explained, says which earnings must be the earnings of the naira, not the katana. So that's what this pasuk is teaching me from V'chayim ka'eshes b'itay la'ama. Says the Gemara, wait a second, based on what you just told me a moment ago, that you brought me the pasuk b'nereh be'saviyah, well, typically, b'nereh be'saviyah. If you could learn that from that pasuk, as you mentioned, that tells me kol shvach neudim laviyah, that means any profit she has, getting engaged, making a deal, whatever it is, she had her lemonade stand and she made money, it's all going to the father. Why do I need a special pasuk to tell me ma'asiyah deha laviyah from la'ama? I knew it already from that catch-all in b'nereh be'saviyah. So Ella rather says the Gemara, obviously, from the fact that Rav did not learn that from that pasuk, obviously it's not true. B'nereh be'saviyah is not teaching me ol shvach neudim go to the father, because you need it for the context of that pasuk itself. Because what's the context of that pasuk of b'nereh be'saviyah? That is b'hafaros nadarim hu dechsiv. That pasuk is going on when the girl makes a neder, that then the father has the rights to nullify her vow. Sachanami here also, it's also not applicable to answer the question. We wanted to know, how do you know that when a naira gets engaged, that the ring is going to the father? Because we said, you can't say that. Just like Rav didn't say the ma'aseh daim of the mas also go to the father from that pasuk. And they bring me old drasha from la'ama to compare bita la'ama. Why didn't he bring it from there? Because that's to mafaros the darim. Doesn't tell me the father has all the rights in this girl that's 12 and a quarter. That's just saying that he could be still nullify her vows when she's a naira. But it doesn't tell me she gets everything, and that's why Rav didn't say b'ma'aseh daim. And therefore, that's not going to answer our question either. Then, if it's not going to answer my question, then how do we know the Kidushin of a naira who has a yad goes to the father? Maybe she gets herself engaged and she gets the money. So the Gemara says, okay, if you're going to say, but neilif minei, let's learn out the halacha of the monies of Kidushin from Nadarim. Yeah, just like the father has the rights of her Nadarim, so too he has the rights of her monies that he'll get that ring that that 16-year-old boy Mashadach Gevein with his 12-year-old daughter. Says the Gemara, no, we know throughout the Gemara it tells us that the laws of monetary are different than the laws of prohibitory, and therefore you can't learn out from the Dagam, which is Isser, to that of Mammon, that the father would get that. Okay, says the Gemara, if you're going to say, wait, Neilif, let's learn out the kesef of her Kedushin, Miknasa, from the money of her penalty, meaning there's halachas in the Torah that are knasim. They're not monies. Monies is when it's the actual monetary value. Knas is when it's an arbitrary Torah penalty that you're going to have to pay out. So there are certain situations if the girl was raped or seduced that the father gets the 50 silver coins, as the Torah explicitly says that he gets it. So you see, the knas that the girl gets goes to the father. So maybe you'll say you learn out from knas that the father gets it, so too the father will get the mammon of Kidushin. Says the Gemara, no. You also can learn out the monetary laws, which is Kidushin is a transaction. That's a monetary thing. You can't learn out from knas because knas is entirely a chiddush. It's something that's a novelty that the Torah penalized, and you cannot learn out from a novelty, because that novelty by default means it's a novelty. And if someone's riding a unicycle and you say it's a novelty, you don't say, that's what people do. I should go get a unicycle. That's what a chiddush is. So a knas, Rashi says, is a chiddush. You can't learn out monetary law from knas. So we're still here with the question: the kedushin of a naira. Where do we know that goes to the father? We can't learn that from Isser, from Nidar. We can't learn that from Knas of Oinus and Mafata. So the Gemara says, okay, Bechitim, we're going to say, Neilif mi boishes begam. The Gemara in Ksubas of Mem base tells us that when someone rapes a girl, so the locha is besides for the Oinus itself, there's other collateral damage that happens to a person that this perpetrator has to pay. There's boishes, shame. It's begam. It's a deficiency. It creates some type of a loss over here. And the Gemara Ksubas tells us that goes to the father. Now, those are not knosses. That's not a penalty. That's actual damage that someone did, albeit emotional, but it has an actual value to it. So that's money. So maybe you're going to say, let's learn that from boishes begam. That goes to the father, and therefore we should know now that the same thing would apply to Kidushin, that when his daughter that's 12 gets engaged, this should go to the father. Says no, Shani Boisha Begam. Boisha Begam is different because Davu Shaykh Bekavayu. The father has skin in that game. He's invested in that. Why? Because the father has the rights to degrade or to embarrass his daughter because of money that's going to be given to him. What does that mean? If he wants to, if let's say there's the town menuvel, when they say menuvel, not the language menuvel, meaning the guy is sores all over his body, he's someone that hasn't showered in like 10 years, but the guy's filthy rich. I guess no pun intended, right? The guy's got he collects, but he's got millions and millions in the bank, and no one wants to marry him. The father says, he walks over to him, no, make a shidduch, you give my daughter, you give me half your fortune. He says, your daughter? Wow. He says, yeah, but half your fortune. That would be for the girl, boisterous, embarrassing, and the pagam, that she's his wife. The father has a choice who he can get his daughter engaged to. So therefore, when someone violates his daughter, who's losing the money? The fact that boisterous, the pagam that she's getting, that's the father's loss. Because now, he's not going to be able to get such a high bidding for his daughter because of what happened what this guy perpetrated. So it's his loss. He could have done his own boishes of begam by marrying her off to some menuvel mukashchin, and now that some other menuvel, in the other sense, in the moral sense, went and coerced his daughter and violated her, well, of course he's going to get it because he's invested. But what does it have to do with Kidushin? Meaning for the Kidushin of a naira, how do we know that even goes to him, meaning that he has the rights to engage her to say that he gets that money? Like that's what we're asking. We're saying maybe a bitin sat leshazeh is only when she's a minor. How do we know that he has the rights and therefore the monies when she's a naira? So the rather says the Gemara, the truth is it's really from the first pasuk that we mentioned. We had mentioned that it says that when a girl as an amavra, Jewish maidservant, leaves her master, we said that that there's no kesef l'adin zeh, there's no money for this master, but there will be money when she leaves from another master, which is her father. Question then you asked was, but it doesn't say ein loy kasef, to say that this master doesn't have, but another master will have. How do you know that when she's leaving her master, meaning her father, that the father is going to get it? Maybe the girl gets it. And that says the Gemara mistabra. It's logical that it's going to go to the father and not to the girl. So right, although it's not indicative in the pasuk, logic will tell us, because the chikam mayid, when you come to exclude that when she leaves her father's household because she's getting engaged, where you're contrasting that with when she leaves as a Jewish maidservant from a master's home, and you're coming to say, here there's no money, but when she leaves from her family, when she gets engaged, there is money. What the logic would tell us is to continue the top of Dalam and Aleph is Yitzia the Kabasakamayit. We're coming to exclude a leaving that is similar to it. Meaning, we want to compare when she leaves, when she gets engaged, similar to when she leaves as a Amma Vriya. To exclude it from the halacha of an Amma, from a maidservant, to say, that there is money over there. Meaning, and what we find when she leaves as a Jewish maidservant, that there's no money to the master, that she's leaving from his domain, is what the pasuk is saying. What's the pasuk saying? When you say v'yatzachinim ein kasef, when she leaves without money, well, who would have gotten money? Who would have gotten money is the master, because that's usually what happens. Is when he bought the maidservant for $600, and she's been a slave already for 3 years. So then, okay, you would pay out 300 of the remaining 3 years left for that amount. But if she turns 12, then she leaves without any money, even though she didn't fill, let's say, how much you would say that you bought her for. So, but it's telling us that the one she's leaving from is the one who doesn't get the money. So too, when we're excluding that there is money that you're inferring, but when she leaves, when she gets engaged, the money is going to the one that she's leaving from, which is the father. So therefore, says the Gemara, logic would tell us that when we're comparing v'yatzachinim en kasef, there's no kasef to this adon, but there is kasef to another adon, it's to the one that you're leaving from, because that's what this idea of the pasuk is. As the maidservant, it's for the master. Here it's going to say, but there is now for the master. But the Gemara says, wait a second. But you can't compare hayetzia, the leaving when she gets engaged, la hayetzia, to when she leaves as a maidservant. How could you say that we're coming to exclude from the pasuk of the Amma Vriya when she leaves, when she gets engaged, but it's not the same? Why? Because the Gemara explains. Hasam over there by the Jewish maidservant, nafkala mishus adon legamri. She totally leaves the domain of her master. So the question is a qualitative question. There it's totally leaving. Over here by the daughter, we're still missing giving her over for the chuppah. So she has not yet left her father's domain for her earnings, to inherit her, until she comes to the chuppah. So how could you compare the two cases and tell me that, we're going to compare the yitzia from adin zeh to yitzia from this adin, but it's not even a full yitzia from her father yet. So how can you say that it's going to have the same halachas, and that's what the pasuk is coming to compare and contrast, when it's not even the same type of believing? How could I know that there's going to be kesed by adin zeh, by the father? And I think my answer is that yes, you're right, but ba'afaras nedarim miya nafkala mishuse. Regarding the nullifying of the vows, however, for that she does leave his domain, meaning that he cannot nullify her vow by himself. It's not like we learned in the Mishnah and the Darim. Nar marasa, the betrothed girl, avio bailam afina deda. The father and the chassan together have to nullify the vows. He wouldn't be able to do it on his own. So on that, at least, she totally left his rishus in the sense of that he cannot be made for the Nedarim himself, and therefore it would qualify as a yitzia when she gets engaged, because really when you get engaged, not really yitzia. That was the Gemara's question. They say, no, it is yitzia. For what? What do you mean? He's still yarshin her. He's still going to get her earnings when she's in Ara, as we brought those other sources. Yes, for Nedarim, and therefore we could compare and contrast that yatzachinim in kasab, there's no kasab la'adin zeh for the adin when she's a Amariya, but there is kesef l'adin acher, which would be her father when she gets engaged, and that's the source for the halacha, how we know that there is going to be kesef of as a kinyan, and that it's going to go to the father. Thank you to any time for hosting us.